The cold steel clamped onto his wrists. The deputies saw a potential threat, the shop owner saw a troublemaker. What they couldn't see was the sentinel of the tomb of the unknowns. And a storm was coming to teach them respect. The low, afternoon sun bled across the rolling hills of Virginia, stretching long, distorted shadows over the quiet streets of Willow Creek. It was a town that prided itself on its postcard-perfect tranquility, a place seemingly preserved in amber, just a few miles but a world away from the solemn grounds of Arlington National Cemetery. Staff Sergeant Ethan Hayes felt the disconnect like a physical pressure change. He eased his beat-up rental car into a gravel parking spot, the crunch of the stones under the tires sounding unnaturally loud in the stillness. For the last 21 hours, his world had been defined by a 63-foot rubber mat, the rhythmic click of his steel-tipped shoes, and the profound, crushing weight of silent honor. 21 steps. A 21-second pause. A turn. Another 21 steps. It was a sacred cadence etched not just into his muscle memory, but into the very fiber of his soul. He was a tomb guard, a sentinel. His life was a testament to those who had no life left to live. Today, however, he was just a son. No pristine, navy blue dress uniform. No polished leather shoes that reflected the sky. He wore a pair of worn jeans, a faded leather jacket that had seen him through a tour in Afghanistan, and a simple baseball cap pulled low over his dark hair. A faint, silvery scar traced a line from his left temple into his hairline, a permanent reminder of a life lived outside the hallowed silence of the tomb. Even in these civilian clothes, Ethan carried the immutable bearing of a soldier. His shoulders were square, his gaze sharp and sweeping, his every movement economical and deliberate. His mission today was far simpler than his duty, yet felt strangely more complex: find a birthday gift for his mother. A sharp, discordant jingle from a bell above the door announced his entry into Patriot's Corner Curios. The name was proudly, almost aggressively, painted on the front window in red, white, and blue. Inside, the air was thick and cloying, a battleground of scents where the overpowering sweetness of cinnamon potpourri was losing a desperate war against a baseline of damp dust and decay. The aisles were narrow and cluttered, creating a claustrophobic maze of kitsch. Racks overflowed with miniature American flags, bobbleheads of past presidents, and knockoff military medals that gleamed with a cheap, tinny luster. Behind the counter, barricaded by a fortress of snow globes and coffee mugs, stood Carl Whitaker. He was a bloated figure of a man, his face flushed with a permanent, angry red that suggested a long simmering rage just beneath the surface. He wore a faded, knockoff "Support Our Troops" t-shirt that was a size too small, stretching tautly over his paunch. It was an emblem of patriotism worn like a costume, and it was the first thing Ethan noticed. Carl's eyes, small and suspicious, flicked up from the dog-eared newspaper spread before him. They scanned Ethan from his dusty boots to the bill of his cap, and in that single, sweeping glance, a verdict was rendered. Trouble. Help you with something? Carl's voice was a low growl, laced with an instant, unearned suspicion. Ethan offered a polite, almost imperceptible nod. Just looking, thanks. It's my mom's birthday. Thought I might find a nice gift for her here. Carl let out a short, sharp snort of derision, folding his fleshy arms across his chest. The strained fabric of his t-shirt tightened. Gift-buying type, huh? You don't look it. What's your deal? You one of those guys who just got off a construction gig down the road? Or maybe one of those wannabe soldier boys, coming in here pretending to be something you're not? Ethan's jaw tightened, a flicker of a muscle betraying his annoyance. He kept his voice even, calm. He'd faced down men with RPGs, a bitter shopkeeper was nothing. I'm just a customer, sir. Here to shop. He moved past the counter, his eyes scanning the dusty shelves. He spotted it on a high shelf in the back, behind a row of garish porcelain eagles. It was a delicate, hand-painted porcelain music box, its lid adorned with a spray of forget-me-nots. Simple. Elegant. Perfect. He felt a genuine smile touch his lips for the first time that day. He could already picture his mother's face. "I know you're kind," Carl's voice followed him, clinging like the shop's musty smell. "Always strutting around here like you own the place. You military?" Ethan paused, his hand halfway to the music box. He hated this part. He didn't wear his service as a badge for civilians to polish or spit on. It was his, private and profound. "I serve," he said, his answer clipped and final. "Serve, huh?" Carl's smirk was audible. He tossed his newspaper onto the counter with a loud rustle. "Yeah, I bet. Desk jockey, right? Pushing papers at the Pentagon. Let me guess, National Guard. A weekend warrior playing dress-up once a month." The insults were a tired litany, ones he had heard in bars and diners across the country. But here, in this suffocating little shop, they felt different. More personal. Ethan's hand, steady and strong, carefully lifted the music box from the shelf. The porcelain was cool to the touch. He thought of his mother's gentle hands, of the lullabies she sang to him as a child. This small, fragile thing was a piece of a different world, a world he fought to protect. He turned back toward the counter, his resolve firm. He wouldn't let this man ruin this simple, peaceful moment. He wouldn't. Ethan placed the music box gently on the glass countertop, the delicate porcelain a stark contrast to the grimy surface. His voice remained a low, controlled monotone. "I'm a tomb guard. At Arlington." The statement hung in the stale air. It was a credential of the highest honor, a title spoken with reverence in the circles that understood its meaning. Here, it was met with a harsh, ugly laugh that seemed to suck the remaining oxygen from the room. "A tomb guard?" Carl wheezed, wiping a tear of mirth from his eye. "Oh, that's rich. Son, I've seen tomb guards on the TV. They're the real deal. Elite. You look like you just crawled out from under a pickup truck. My uncle served in the 82nd Airborne. He'd laugh you out of the state." The insult was designed to provoke, to strip away his dignity piece by piece. But Ethan's training was a fortress. He could stand unblinking in a hurricane, he could endure the venom of a bitter man. His mind flashed to a memory, a drill sergeant, his face inches from Ethan's, screaming spittle and fury. "Emotion is a luxury you can't afford, Hayes. Control it, or it will kill you faster than any bullet." He drew a slow, centering breath. "I'm not here to debate my service record. I'm here to buy this music box. How much is it? You think you can just waltz in here, spin some fairy tale, and I'll just play along?" Carl leaned forward, his bulk pressing against the counter. "I don't like liars. And I especially don't like people who lie about serving this country. It's disrespectful." The irony was so thick Ethan could almost taste it. He reached into his back pocket, his movements slow and deliberate, and pulled out his wallet. He extracted his military ID, a laminated card bearing his photograph, name, rank, and the unmistakable seal of the U.S. Department of Defense. He slid it across the counter. "Here's my identification. Staff Sergeant Ethan Hayes. U.S. Army." Just as he did, the bell above the door chimed again, its sharp jingle cutting through the tension. A young woman stepped inside, her fiery red hair pulled back into a messy but practical bun. She carried a worn camera bag slung over her shoulder, and her eyes, sharp and intelligent as a hawk's, took in the scene in a fraction of a second, the large, irate man behind the counter, the calm, coiled stillness of the man in the leather jacket, the military ID lying between them like a gauntlet thrown down. This was Sarah Coleman, a freelance journalist who prowled the edges of Willow Creek, hunting for the stories the sleepy local gazette was too timid to touch. She sensed the electric hum of conflict and, feigning interest in a rack of keychains, she unzipped her bag and discreetly activated the audio recorder on her phone. Carl snatched the ID from the counter. He gave it a cursory, contemptuous glance before tossing it back as if it were a piece of trash. "This looks fake. You think you can fool me with some photocopied nonsense from the internet? I've seen it all. Enough of you people coming through here, causing trouble. Ethan's voice dropped, the calm exterior hardening into something colder, sharper. That is an official, federal identification card, sir. Damaging or disrespecting it is a federal offense. I suggest you take another look. Sarah's fingers hovered over her phone's screen. This was escalating beyond a simple disagreement. This was becoming something else entirely. Carl's face, already flushed, deepened to a shade of crimson. He jabbed a thick finger toward Ethan. Don't you dare tell me what to do in my own store. And don't you threaten me. You're acting suspicious, and I don't like your tone. I'm calling the cops. There's no need for that, Ethan said, his hands held in the open, away from his body. I'm not a threat. I'm a customer. Too late, Carl snarled, grabbing a greasy landline phone from under the counter. He turned his back slightly, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, panicked whisper. Yeah, sheriff's office. Carl Whitaker down at Patriot's Corner. I've got a guy in here, acting real sketchy. Threatening me. Looks like he's up to no good, maybe casing the place. You better send a car. Quick. Sarah's heart sank. She'd seen this script play out before. Small-town suspicion curdling into official action, especially when the subject didn't fit a narrow, preconceived mold. Ethan didn't move. His posture remained calm but hyper-alert, his eyes missing nothing. He was a soldier in hostile territory, his training overriding any instinct to argue or flee. He stood his ground, a silent, solitary sentinel in a dusty little shop, waiting for the inevitable escalation. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that this was about to get much, much worse. Minutes crawled by, each second thick with unspoken hostility. The only sounds were the hum of a dying fluorescent light and Carl's heavy, self-satisfied breathing. Then, a new sound intruded, the crunch of tires on gravel, followed by the slam of car doors. Red and blue lights began to pulse silently, painting the shop's grimy windows in strobing flashes of color, turning the dusty merchandise into grotesque, dancing silhouettes. The door burst open and two deputies filled the frame. The senior officer, Deputy Tom Randall, was a man whose authority seemed to emanate from his thick, perfectly groomed mustache. He wore his Oakleys pushed up on his head, and his posture was one of sheer, bored arrogance. Behind him was his junior, Deputy Jake Ellis, a lanky, fidgety man who couldn't seem to keep his hand off the butt of his pistol. There was a cruel, eager energy about him. He looked like a dog straining at a leash, desperate to be let loose. Randall's eyes immediately locked onto Ethan, dismissing Sarah and Carl as part of the scenery. All right. What's the situation here? He barked, his hand already resting casually on his holster. Carl, now emboldened by the arrival of his reinforcements, pointed a trembling finger. This guy, officer. Causing a scene, refusing to leave. He's claiming to be some big-shot soldier, showing me a fake ID, and then he threatened me. Ethan raised his hands slowly, palms open and visible. It was a gesture of de-escalation he'd learned in environments far more dangerous than this. Officers, my name is Staff Sergeant Ethan Hayes, United States Army. I'm an active duty tomb guard at Arlington. My military identification is on the counter right there. I came in to buy a gift for my mother. Ellis sauntered over, his boots scuffing the dirty floor. He picked up the ID with 2 fingers, as if it were contaminated. He held it up to the light, then let out a disbelieving chuckle, tapping the laminated card with his fingernail. A tomb guard, huh? This plastic feels cheap. You get this online. They do a good job with the little hologram, I'll give you that. Randall stepped closer, invading Ethan's personal space. His voice was low, a menacing purr. I don't care about this piece of plastic. Let's see a driver's license. Now. It's in my wallet, Ethan said, his voice still impossibly steady. He reached for his back pocket, his movements telegraphed and slow. Along with my federal travel orders. I'm on official business, heading back to my post at Arlington right after this. He produced the documents. Randall took them, glanced at the official letterhead and stamped seals for less than a second, and then tossed them back onto the counter next to the music box. These don't mean a thing. Anyone can print papers off the internet. Sarah's jaw dropped. She couldn't stay silent any longer. She stepped forward, her phone now held up more openly, its lens an unblinking eye. "Excuse me, officers. I'm Sarah Coleman, a freelance reporter. That ID is a federal document, and those look like official travel orders. Maybe you should verify them with Arlington before you jump to conclusions. It would only take a minute." Randall shot her a venomous glare. "Stay out of this, ma'am. This is official police business. It doesn't concern you." He turned back to Ethan, his patience gone. Ethan's voice cut through the tension, hard as forged steel. "I am respectfully requesting that you contact my commanding officer, Colonel James Monroe, at Arlington National Cemetery. He will confirm my identity and my status." Ellis burst out laughing, a high-pitched, mocking sound. "You hear this, Tom? He thinks he's got a direct line to a full-bird colonel. Thinks he can order us around." He unclipped his handcuffs from his belt, the metal links jingling ominously. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." Ethan didn't budge. A line had been crossed. "Sir, you are making a serious mistake. I am not resisting, but I will not be unlawfully detained. I am demanding you verify my identity." Randall's face darkened, the board facade cracking to reveal pure anger. "That's it. You're under arrest. Obstruction of justice." Before Ethan could process the charge, Ellis lunged, grabbing his arm and twisting it violently behind his back. Ethan's body tensed, every combat instinct screaming at him to react, to break the hold, to neutralize the threat. But another, deeper training took over. The discipline of the tomb. He thought of the flag-draped caskets. He thought of the silent, solemn promise he represented. To fight back here would be to dishonor them. He forced his muscles to go limp. The serrated steel of the cuffs dug into the pressure points of his wrists, a familiar but unwelcome sensation that sent a jolt of cold fury through his disciplined calm. The click of the ratchet locking into place was deafening. It echoed in the small shop, a sound of final, irreversible error. Outside, a small crowd had gathered, drawn by the flashing lights. Locals, a few tourists, and an old man in a faded Vietnam veteran cap, his face a mask of stunned disbelief. Ethan was cuffed. A sentinel of the tomb of the unknown soldier stood humiliated in a dusty junk shop, arrested for the crime of not looking the part. As the deputies began to shove him toward the door, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the grimy shop window, not a soldier, not a guard, just a man in handcuffs, his head held high in silent defiance. "You are detaining an active-duty soldier without cause or verification." Sarah Coleman's voice rang out, sharp and clear, cutting through the stunned silence of the onlookers. "I am recording this, and for the record, it's going live. Right now." She hit the button on her phone. The small, private recording instantly became a public broadcast, streamed onto a social media platform popular with veterans. Her camera's view was steady, capturing the entire damning tableau: Ethan, calm and dignified even in cuffs, the deputies, their postures aggressive and dismissive, the federal ID lying ignored on the counter next to the forgotten music box. Almost immediately, the view counter began to climb. 100, 500. 1,000, comments started flooding the screen, a digital torrent of outrage. "That's a Tomb Sentinel's brother, I can tell. Uncuff him now. Willow Creek PD, you are a disgrace to the badge. I served 20 years. That man has more honor in his little finger than those two clowns have in their whole department." The fire had been lit. Inside the shop, Carl smirked, crossing his arms, a smug victor. "That's what you get," he muttered, loud enough for Ethan to hear. "Acting like you're better than us. Ethan's eyes met Carl's. They were unflinching, filled not with hatred, but with a profound, weary disappointment. "I don't think I'm better than anyone," he said, his voice even. "I just want to do my job. And honor the men I guard." Outside, the old man in the Vietnam vet cap could no longer contain himself. He pushed through the small crowd, his voice shaky but resolute. "Let that man go. He's one of ours. I served in the Vietnam, and I know a real soldier when I see one. You ought to be ashamed." Randall ignored him, shoving Ethan roughly toward the patrol car. "Let's go, tough guy. You can tell your war stories from a jail cell." But as they reached the doorway, a loud, insistent buzzing cut through the air. Ethan's phone, left on the counter, lit up. The screen displayed a single name that seemed to radiate authority, Col. Monroe. Sarah, quicker than anyone, darted forward and snatched the phone before Carl could. She held it up, the screen glowing like a beacon. "Officers. This is Colonel James Monroe from Arlington. I think you need to answer this." Ellis hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. But Randall, high on his own power, snatched the phone from her hand, his expression sour. He put it to his ear, barking, "Yeah, what?" A voice erupted from the phone's speaker. It was not loud, but it possessed a quality of command that was absolute. It was like crackling ice and authority, a voice that could cut through the din of battle, and it sliced through the shop's stale air with the force of a battering ram. "This is Colonel James Monroe of the United States Army, commanding officer of the guard at the tomb of the unknown soldier. You are, at this moment, illegally detaining Staff Sergeant Ethan Hayes, a sentinel under my direct command. You will release him immediately. You will then stand by for further instructions. Is that understood?" The color drained from Randall's face. He looked as if he'd been physically struck. He stammered, his bravado vanishing like smoke. We didn't know, sir. He was acting suspicious." The colonel's voice dropped into a dangerously quiet register. "You had his federal identification in your hands. You had his official travel orders. You had his sworn testimony. You chose not to check. You chose to escalate. So let me be clear. Release him. Now." The crowd outside, sensing the shift in power, grew louder. The old veteran began a chant, "Free the soldier. Free the soldier," and others joined in, their voices a rising chorus of indignation. Ellis fumbled for the handcuff key, his hands trembling. The key slipped in the lock once, twice, before he finally managed to open the cuffs. They fell from Ethan's wrists with a metallic clatter. Randall stood frozen, muttering curses under his breath, avoiding Ethan's steady gaze. Ethan rubbed his wrists, his expression unreadable. He calmly took his phone from Randall's limp hand. The screen was now cracked. "Colonel, I'm secure," he said into the phone. "Awaiting your orders." The colonel's voice softened almost imperceptibly. "Stay right where you are, Sergeant. We're coming to you." As if on cue, a new sound filled the air, growing from a distant hum to a powerful roar. 3 imposing, black government SUVs screeched into the parking lot, their tires spitting gravel. They surrounded the lone patrol car in a display of overwhelming federal power. Doors flew open in unison, and from the lead vehicle stepped Colonel James Monroe. He was 55, his uniform a masterpiece of crisp lines and gleaming brass. His eyes, the color of storm clouds, blazed with a cold, righteous fury. He was flanked by a team of stone-faced military police, whose mere presence commanded absolute silence. The crowd parted like the Red Sea as the colonel strode forward. His polished leather boots seemed to strike sparks from the asphalt. He marched directly to Ethan, ignoring everyone else. "Sergeant Hayes," his voice boomed across the now silent parking lot. "Are you harmed?" Ethan squared his shoulders, his posture instinctively shifting to attention. "No, sir. Just a misunderstanding. The colonel's gaze was like granite. This was not a misunderstanding, Sergeant. This was an outrage. Colonel Monroe turned his attention from Ethan, and his icy gaze fell upon the two deputies. Randall and Ellis seemed to physically shrink under the weight of it. They stood beside their patrol car, suddenly looking less like enforcers of the law and more like truant schoolboys caught vandalizing property. "You two," the colonel's voice was low, but it carried across the lot, each word a carefully aimed projectile. "Your names and badge numbers. Now." Randall, his face pale and slick with sweat, stammered out his details. Ellis followed, his voice barely a whisper. The colonel didn't write anything down. He didn't need to. The moment was being seared into his memory. "As of this moment," Monroe declared, his voice leaving no room for argument, "this incident is under federal jurisdiction. It will be investigated by the Department of the Army and the Department of Justice. You are ordered to stand down. Do not leave the vicinity. Do not speak to anyone. Any further action on your part, including deleting your own reports, will be considered obstruction of a federal investigation. Am I making myself clear?" "Sir, we didn't know he was," Randall began, a desperate plea in his voice. Monroe cut him off with a slice of his hand. "You had his credentials. You had a direct order from a serving soldier to verify his identity. You chose to ignore them. You chose arrogance over procedure. That choice has consequences." Carl Whitaker, who had been lurking in the doorway of his shop, shifted uncomfortably. He tried to reclaim a shred of his earlier bluster. I was just protecting my store. This guy," he looked. The colonel's head snapped toward him, silencing him instantly. Monroe took two slow, deliberate steps in his direction. "You run a shop called Patriot's Corner?" he asked, his voice dripping with contempt. He gestured at Carl's t-shirt. "Support our troops. Let me tell you what patriotism is, sir. It's not a slogan you print on a cheap t-shirt. It's a commitment. It's a sacrifice. It's embodied in men like Staff Sergeant Hayes, who stand guard over our nation's soul in the dead of night, while you sleep. You didn't see a man. You saw a stereotype. And your prejudice has cost you, and your town, more than you can possibly realize." Carl stumbled back into the darkness of his shop, his face ashen. The sanctimonious patriot had been unmasked. The military police formed a protective, disciplined circle around Ethan, escorting him to the lead SUV. Sarah Coleman followed, her phone still recording, her voice a steady narration for the thousands now watching. "This is the moment Staff Sergeant Ethan Hayes is freed. A tomb guard, wrongfully detained in Willow Creek, Virginia. The truth is finally coming out, thanks to the swift action of his command." As the SUV's door closed, Ethan glanced back. The shop looked pathetic, a monument to petty ignorance. The crowd was a mixture of ashamed and angry faces. And in the midst of them, the old Vietnam veteran stood tall. He raised a trembling, arthritic hand to his forehead in a slow, proud salute. Ethan met his gaze and gave a short, sharp nod of acknowledgement. A silent message passed between two generations of soldiers: we are not alone. Inside the immaculate SUV, Ethan sat quietly, staring out at the passing fields as they sped away from Willow Creek. The silence was broken by the colonel. "This goes higher, Sergeant," Monroe said, his jaw tight. "I've already been on the phone with the Pentagon. There will be an internal review, a civil liberties investigation, the works. This town, and that police department, are about to get a master class in accountability." Ethan finally let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "They should have just checked the ID, sir. That's all it would have taken." "They're about to wish they had," Monroe replied, his voice grim. By the next morning, Sarah's video was not just viral, it was a national firestorm. Every major news channel ran the clip on a loop: Ethan's stoic dignity, the deputy's sneering aggression, the colonel's dramatic arrival. Veterans groups flooded social media with messages of support for Ethan and condemnation for the Willow Creek Sheriff's Department. Civil rights leaders labeled it a clear-cut case of profiling and prejudice. The governor's office issued a statement calling the incident a deeply disturbing affront to a national hero. Back in Willow Creek, Sheriff Dan Carter, a man who had coasted through his career on small-town politics, faced a swarm of national reporters outside his office. We regret this unfortunate incident," he mumbled, sweat beading on his forehead. "The officers involved, Randall and Ellis, have been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation." A young reporter, emboldened by Sarah's work, pushed a microphone forward. "Sheriff, how could your deputies possibly ignore a federal military ID? Was race or his appearance a factor in this arrest?" Carter fumbled, muttering about protocol and high-tension situations, but the flimsy excuses fell flat. The department was cornered, its systemic failures laid bare for the entire country to see. The reckoning had begun. The days that followed were a cascade of consequences. Anonymous sources from within the Willow Creek Sheriff's Department, empowered by the national spotlight, leaked documents to Sarah Coleman. They revealed that deputies Randall and Ellis had a history of complaints against them, excessive force, biased stops, racial profiling, all of which had been quietly swept under the rug by Sheriff Carter. Not this time. The Department of Justice officially opened a civil rights investigation into the department's patterns and practices. A prominent civil rights law firm filed a formal complaint on Ethan's behalf. Willow Creek was no longer just a dot on a map, it was a flashpoint in a national conversation about respect, authority, and prejudice. A week after the incident, Ethan stood at a podium set up just outside the main gates of Arlington National Cemetery. The day was overcast, the gray sky lending a solemn gravity to the occasion. His dress uniform was immaculate, the medals on his chest a testament to a career of quiet valor. A forest of microphones and cameras was arrayed before him. He hadn't wanted this spotlight. His life was dedicated to honoring the anonymous. But Colonel Monroe had been clear. "Your voice matters now, Sergeant. It matters more than you know. Use it." Ethan stepped to the mic, his gaze as steady and unwavering as it was on the plaza. "I am Staff Sergeant Ethan Hayes, a tomb guard of the United States Army," he began, his voice clear and strong. "For 10 years, I have had the privilege of serving this nation. On battlefields in the dark of night, and now here, at the sacred tomb of the unknown soldier. My job, my entire purpose, is to honor those who gave everything for our country." He paused, letting the words settle. The crowd, veterans in worn-out caps, families holding small American flags, students with handmade signs, hung on his every word. A week ago, in a small town not far from here, that honor was questioned. Not because of any action I took, but because of assumptions made about who I was based on my civilian clothes. I was judged by my appearance, not by my service. I was dismissed, disrespected, and wrongfully cuffed. But I am not here today to ask for your pity. I am here because silence in the face of injustice is not an option. Respect for one another should not be negotiable. And honor is not something you wear. It's something you live. It cannot be taken away from you. The reporters scribbled furiously, but Ethan wasn't speaking to them. He was speaking to the kid at home watching on TV, to the veteran feeling forgotten, to every person who had ever been judged unfairly. We guard the unknowns because they represent every single soldier who made the ultimate sacrifice. Their sacrifice was silent, but our respect for them must be loud. If we cannot show basic respect to the living who wear the uniform, and to those who have earned the right to wear it, then how can we possibly claim to truly honor the fallen? He stepped back from the podium. The applause started small, then grew into a tidal wave of sound that drowned out the frantic clicking of cameras. Sarah Coleman stood in the crowd, a proud smile on her face, her article already drafted, ready to tell the world about the Sentinel who stood tall. Later, as the evening sky deepened to bruised purple, Ethan returned to his post. The world was watching now, but it didn't matter. He wasn't guarding for them. He was guarding for the unknowns, for the truth, and for every person who had ever been told they didn't belong. As a light rain began to fall, misting the polished marble of the tomb, he took his position. The rifle was transferred to his outside shoulder with flawless precision. He began his solitary walk. 21 steps, the rhythm unbroken, a heartbeat of devotion. The rain washed over the stones, over his uniform, but it could not touch the fire in his soul. Ethan Hayes stood taller than ever, a guardian not just of the dead, but of the honor they died for. Ethan Hayes' story became a powerful reminder that honor must be consistently defended and respect must always be earned, both by individuals and institutions. The conversation it sparked continues. What do you believe is the root cause of such profound misunderstandings in our communities? Have you ever witnessed a situation where someone was judged unfairly before their story was known? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and please, comment with respect for all perspectives. If you believe that heroes like Staff Sergeant Hayes deserve our unwavering support, share this story, and subscribe to our channel to help us continue celebrating the echoes of honor.